All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, my name is Dr. Kellie Dixon, also known as Dr. K, and it is my pleasure. I'm so excited about this new webinar series, the HBCU webinar series, which is sponsored by NASPA Region 3. And today we have a show for you. So today's topic is the importance of research on HBCUs. And so just a little background in regards to this webinar series. I do serve as the HBCU Division Chair for the NASPA Region 3. And I have two goals. One goal is to increase the membership of HBCU professionals in NASPA. And then two, to bring light to the work that we do on our campuses at HBCUs, and bring light also to the staff and professional development of our professionals at HBCUs. And so this is one of my key initiatives, and I'm so thankful to Dr. Hyatt for the opportunity to bring forth this webinar series. So we're going to kick it off with research, right? How important is research, especially in the times that we are in today? So just some housekeeping things. This webinar will be recorded. I do ask that you mute yourselves at this time. And then I'll have my guests unmute themselves as we go through the presentation. But if you can take this time to mute yourselves, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, so you're gonna see me kind of go back and forth just because I'm on two dual screens, so I wanna be transparent in that. But I want this slide to give recognition to our historically Black colleges and universities in this nation. And so the first HBCU was founded in 1837, Cheney University in Pennsylvania. So definitely want to give honor to the beginning and the continued legacy that we have in regards to HBCUs. All right, so let me announce and introduce to some, present to others, my colleagues, my friends in this work as it relates to HBCUs. We have Dr. Erin Lynch, who is the Associate Provost of Scholarship, Research, and Innovation at Winston-Salem State University. In her 8 years in education, she has developed over $400 million in proposals for federal agencies like the Department of Education, Department of Justice, NASA, National Science Foundation, and Health and Human Services, and foundations like Robert Wood Johnson, Johnson Scholarship Foundation, and others. Using her Certified Research Administrator's credentials, she has served as PI and co-PI on 7 funded projects and secured over $3.4 million in awards. She serves as a program evaluator on a NSF S in STEM and a NSF CS for All Computer Science project, and a reviewer for the U.S. Department of Education, National Science Foundation, and the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. Her passion is to cultivate externally funded-minded institutional personnel for the benefit of students and the institution. What you see beside Dr. Lynch's picture is a brief little history on Winston-Salem State University, which was founded as the Slater Industrial Academy by Simon Green Atkins on September the 28th, 1892. Atkins had an audacious vision to create an institution where every student would meet the challenges of the day equipped with an education designed to intellectually prepare the head, the hand, and heart. 25 students attended classes in one room frame structure and were taught by a single instructor. Winston-Salem State University is located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Next, we have Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, who is the Provost and Senior Vice Provost for Academic Affairs at Virginia Union University, where he also serves as Professor of Urban Education and Director of the Center for the Study of HBCUs. He is Specialty Chief Editor for Frontiers in Education Journal, Associate Editor of Social Sciences and Humanities, and oversees a book series on Black colleges. Dr. Strayhorn does work at Virginia Union University, which was founded in 1865 to give newly emancipated slaves an opportunity for education and advancement. The university is the result of the merger of 4 institutions: Richmond Theological Seminary, Wayland Seminary, Hartshorne Memorial College, and Storr College. Virginia Union University is located in Petersburg, Virginia. Welcome, co-hosts, co-presenters. How are you?
Hello.
Hello,
Dr.
hello.
K.
Welcome, welcome. I'm excited about this conversation with you all. And just to our audience, if you have questions, please feel free to note those in the chat. And just a correction, I got a little excited. Virginia Union University is in Richmond, Virginia. I should know that because I'm a native of Virginia, so I should know that. So my apologies for that. But if you have questions throughout, please note those in the chat. We will have a Q&A at the end as well. But once again, welcome Dr. Lynch and Dr. Strayhorn.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Get right into this discussion. So my first question for you is, can you discuss your role in research as it relates to HBCUs?
Who wants to? Should I take it? Okay, ladies first. So my role as Associate Provost of Scholarship Research and Innovation is literally to cultivate the intellectual capital that is housed at our institution for the benefit of our students and the benefit of our institution. I have the privilege, because that's really what it is. I have the privilege of being able to work with phenomenal faculty to bring their ideas to fruition, primarily through acquiring external funding. I also have the ability and the privilege to support our graduate programs and our research endeavors across the institution for undergraduates and graduate students. So that's what my role is. My research, particularly in relation to HBCUs, as you heard in my bio, I am very much interested in interventions and equity for all, right? And so my research in the last, I've only been in higher ed 8 years, so the last 3 years of my time in higher ed has all been in equity for HBCUs when it comes to research. Now, HBCUs bring in 8/100ths of the federal funding that's allotted for R&D, for research and development. And we produce 30% of all Black scientists in this country. So there's this huge inequity that exists between what we are doing and the money that's given to us to value what we are doing. So, so my research in the last few years has been in trying to create and codify a model for HBCUs to increase their research productivity. And I see some of my co-researchers on the line, Dr. Scott Wicker out at Kentucky State. I see he's one of my co-PIs of the project. And so this is what we've been doing the last few years to be able to benefit our students and our institutions.
Awesome.
Nice job, Dr. Lynch. Good afternoon to everyone. Again, special thanks to Dr. K for inviting us to be part of this really exciting conversation, and then certainly to NASPA Region 3 and the HBCU initiative there for the work that you're doing to turn attention to our beloved historically Black colleges. And to everyone who has joined us, it's not too late for you to go ahead and text a friend, tweet a friend, Facebook a friend, and tell them, hey, don't miss out. We got about, 50 some minutes left. You want to join us. So to this question about my role in regards to research focused on HBCUs, I'm just going to really build on what Dr. Lynch already said. And that is that I think about my role in three different ways, or on three different planes. So first, in my professional role as Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at Virginia Union University, my assignment is to supervise and oversee all of the academic programs and the intellectual property of the university. So there's a level of supervision, there's work around cultivation, which is what Erin mentioned. There's also this work around curation of intellectual property, so that I'm not, I'm a scientist, I'm a scholar, I'm a researcher turned administrator. So I think for those who are in the listening audience who will watch this later, throughout your career, you have pivots that you make, right? From being the sole researcher doing your work to, in my case, I was a graduate faculty member starting to facilitate the research of my students and learning how to advise and ready them for their careers, and then turned now senior level administrator, that I do that now, not so much for myself and my own scholarship, although I still continue to write and do that research. We'll come to some of that later, but to do it for the university and for the faculty who work here on behalf of the students who study here. So the cultivation, curation of that intellectual property of the university. I think also because I'm working with Dr. Hakeem Lucas, who is our president. I would describe him as a very entrepreneurial president, and he embodies those traits in his vision setting and his leadership. There's a part of my role that is really about helping the academic leaders, that's the deans, with the faculty, really turn intellectual property into intellectual capital. How do we turn research into capital? How do we turn processes and procedures and programs into products so that we can ultimately, generate revenue for the institution, but also for Black colleges locally and nationally, and for the larger Black community. I think as a center director, and we'll come to this, I think later, I direct the Center for the Study of HBCUs. My job there is to really do this work, not at the institution only, but on a national scope. How do I cultivate Black scholars? How do I use the center, build the center, lead the center in a way that promotes Black scholars and Black scholarship, that creates avenues for the development and curation and cultivation of Black scholarship about HBCUs? And so we have a book series. My assignment there is really, how do I make sure that Black scholars and scholars at HBCUs get book contracts, turn their ideas into books that have a longer shelf life than most journal articles, and certainly, most things that we would talk about. So I think that's really important, to build the center and lead it in a way that produces the next generation of high quality HBCU scholarship, to serve as a voice, not the voice, but a voice for Black colleges, and then to create the center's channels that will amplify the voices of others. So she didn't ask me to say this, but in about 2 days, our first blog will come out, and it's written by Dr. K, who has written the inaugural blog for the center. And there are people who would say, well, why wouldn't you write the first blog as the director? And it's because I'm pretty clear on my assignment. I don't need to write another blog for people to know that I can write. I don't need to be the only person writing in this space. I need to create the mechanisms that give voice to those who are also out there doing the work. And I think that's another part of what I see as my role when it comes to research focused on HBCUs. And then lastly, and finally, it is, and Dr. K and I had this conversation at ACPA this year. I'm a man of faith, and we didn't have that conversation, but I'm saying it now, that I firmly believe that, to whom much is given, much is required. And I'm blessed that I think I have been afforded opportunities because of the sacrifices of my mom, my dad, my grandmother, and many, many others who have helped me along the way in my good times and my bad times. And so now that I'm here, the question becomes, how can I use what I've got to help support other people, right? Not just myself, not just my center, not just my institution. And so when Dr. K said she was doing this, I thought part of my role is to help people understand that we've got to pay it forward and pay it backward and lift as we rise and keep shining and all of that. And so being part of other people's initiatives and efforts is really important as a third part of their role.
Yeah. And one of the things that I kind of got from both of you is that shared knowledge amongst HBCUs and the professionals that are working there to really elevate the work that we're doing and put it into research. And we're going to talk a little later on the application of research, but we can't apply what we don't study in research, right? So moving on to the next question is, why do you believe there's a lack of research focused on HBCUs? And then how can we change that narrative?
So I guess I'll take this one too. So we're going to keep this completely transparent.
Please do.
Absolutely. You see the little hair flip. This is how transparent we're about to keep it. I had a colleague a few days ago. Actually, it's probably some weeks ago at this point. All my time blurs together. A colleague told me that the program officer shared with them that they had concerns about transferring a multi-million-dollar project to my institution, okay? Because we were in HBCU, right? And then that delved into a deeper conversation that HBCU's leading research comes off as ghetto to particular program officers and agencies. So why is there a lack of research focused there? Okay, because people aren't seeing the value, okay, in what it is that we contribute. People aren't seeing the value in our voices. This is a systemic thing in research. This is why you have initiatives like at NSF, you have an entire separate unit of funding, HBCU Up, right? TCUs, the HSIs. You have completely different pots of money, okay, for HBCU and minority serving institutions to be able to compete to get their research funded. We are still this other, right, in everybody's world. And so until we make the determination, as Dr. Strayhorn has started with the center, until we make the determination that we're going to tell our own story through our research, then there's always going to be a lack of research on us. We're always going to allow others to come in and research us, right? And then publish off of our experiences, when we should be the ones narrating our own experiences and our own research, right? Like I have phenomenal researchers at my institution, right? My chemistry department, phenomenal researchers. My economics department, I'm working with a team right now. They have over 200 publications between them, between books and journals. They are called upon by the EU to be able to make policy implications for from Europe. But where's their funding here, right? Where's the value in what they're contributing being recognized here in the US? So until we can start telling our own story with what we contribute in the research world, there will always be a lack of research on us and for us, by us, like true FUBU model, for us, by us. I'm completely in favor of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think about, so when I did my dissertation, I focused on student affairs assessment, and looking at that, everybody that I was researching, everything I was looking at, no one was looking at HBCUs. And I also want to bring notice that there is a difference between a minority serving institution and a historically Black college or university in terms of HBCUs were founded historically for Black students because we weren't given the opportunity to attend these institutions of higher learning, versus minority serving institutions is based on a certain population that you have, a percentage of the population that you have in terms of how the government, et cetera, provides funding. And so it was eye-opening to me that you have sustainable institutions for HBCUs, 105, 101, depending on who you're looking at, and no one looks at them as a population to study to advance the body of knowledge. And so I agree with you in terms of we can't continue to allow other people who are not part of the HBCU mindset to do the research, write about it, and then we that work at HBCUs, alum of HBCUs, et cetera, have to go and defend that work. It becomes a little disheartening, a lot disheartening to that.
All right, and I'm going to add one more point to that before I hop off to Dr. Strayhorn. But the other piece of that is, as student affairs personnel, right, you also have to get past this thought process that research is some strange, like abstract thing that happens in a lab, right?
Right.
Y'all are dealing with project goals, objectives, assessment tools. Okay, what is that? That's research, right? So you all have a plethora of data just sitting at your fingertips, right? That can be processed, analyzed, that can be interpreted so that you can make evidence-based or research-based decisions that benefit our students. Like we have to accept that is also part of scholarship, right? And so like that's, yeah, it's all there.
So I'll add to the conversation by not repeating what Dr. Lynch has said, but just say echo, ditto, everything. Since she started with the hair flip, I guess I could flip my hair's growing. I mean, this is my COVID hair. So, you know, but I would add a couple of things, right, that to the conversation. And I think this is the slide where we have another example that I asked Dr. K to embed to share, because I think it reveals something that the three of us decided we want to keep it real, have the conversation, put it on display. And I think it's important to really answer this question, right? So you want to know why we don't have more, I'm sorry, can you go back to the last slide just so I can get the question right? Then we'll come back to this. This is really exciting. So the lack of research. Why do you believe there is a lack of research focused on HBCUs? And so this is where I want to begin. I actually don't think that we have a lack of researchable topics.
Right.
We do not have a lack of ideas. Contrary to popular belief, though, apparently even Wall Street doesn't understand this, there is no lack of Black talent in this country. And there's no lack of HBCU talent. And by the way, HBCU talent is not exclusively Black. That's not just for the audience, that's really for the reviewers of journals and the editors of journals and the editors of the reviewers of grants and the heads of federal agencies that make decisions about grants that often assume that everybody at a HBCU is Black. I'm Black. I'm gonna be Black at the end of this webinar. I was Black at the beginning of this webinar. I have no intentions of ever changing that, but I gotta tell you, I supervise an enormously diverse faculty who are diverse in their race, in their ethnicity, and their political affiliations, and their religious beliefs, and their sexual orientation, and their age, their discipline, their training, their perspective. The same way in which the world is enormously diverse, so too are historically Black colleges. All right. So then the other part of this is, so then why is there this paucity of research focused on HBCUs? And then how do we change this narrative? I think it has to do a lot with what Erin said about telling our own story, right? There's this old proverb that I'm paraphrasing that until the lion tells his own story or their own story, the hunter will always be glorified, right? And so this idea that we don't talk about our institutions, because the moment, it's interesting. I've learned to write about it in journal articles though, right? The moment I write about Black folk, reviewers want to say that's too subjective because the author is Black. The moment I want to do a study on all Black students, it's like, well, that's not objective enough. You got to have some diversity to the sample. But the whole country was fine when the sample was exclusively white. We didn't make white folk and white scholars back in the 50s and 40s and 30s diversify their sample. We didn't have a problem with it. In fact, in most programs, graduate programs across fields, marketing, business, education, sociology, the canon was written by white folk who trained with all white folk based on small sample studies of white folk. And it became the knowledge base for everything that we do. No one had a problem with it. But the moment that it becomes me, HBCUs, Black folk, people of color, it becomes a problem. And so one reason why I think we have a lack of research is because of that. The fact that the whole paradigm shift that has happened has not yet changed the academy. It's happened, but the academy has not adjusted. Higher education was founded with Harvard in 1636 for sons of wealthy white families. And then all of us, for the most part, came to higher education and the system didn't change. We had to change to adjust to the system. And as long as there's that direction of modification and adjustment, and it's all small and incremental and slow, we'll never fully accommodate what we need in terms of research. I think the second thing is that we also have a problem where when it comes to telling our own story, now this is the part where I hope we can talk about, right? Because it's a little direct, it's a little transparent, and no, it's a little honest, but we got to have honest conversation, right? And that is, truth of the matter is, what is our story?
Mm-hmm.
And do we know it? And how do we know it? And what's the data that we can marshal to demonstrate that that is our collective and individual impact on students and on institutions, on society? How well do we, people used to tell me sometimes, like, I was a good storyteller. I don't know if I'm a good storyteller, but I know my grandmother, who's deceased now, she was a great storyteller. But what my grandmother taught me about storytelling is you got to know the story well. You got to learn how to master that story so that you can, if you are called in the moment to offer a 2-minute version, you know how to cut that big full story down to 2 minutes and maximize your moment. You don't get lost in the details, and that you use the fuller story when you have the full 30 minutes or an hour. The question for us as a community is, what is the story about historically Black colleges? How well do we know that story? How can we observe and measure it using the appropriate tools and techniques? And then here's the part that's going to pivot to the next slide, and that is, do we have the intellectual courage to tell it, and to tell it well? Because to tell this story, you're going to have to create space for it. It is a counter story, as we would talk about in critical race theory. So I submitted a paper to a well-known journal, got this feedback from reviewer number 1, of course. I don't know who reviewer number 1 is, but they always are giving us grief. So I just want to read this for the sake of some conversation, and then just let Dr. K and Erin and I, Dr. Lynch and I, kick it around. So it says, thanks for this submission. You're welcome. It is a well-written study that sheds light on serious issues about student learning and success. The sample is adequate, but suffers from a fatal issue. I would encourage the author to seriously consider expanding the study by including either whites or Blacks at majority institutions. The study was about Black students at HBCUs, by the way. You need to ask the perspectives of the whites to make comparisons with the sample from HBCUs, and it goes on and on and on and on. Well, whoever wrote this, I pray to God you're in the audience. First of all, you do not write feedback like this to an author in today's time using language like fatal issue. No matter what the point is about sample, I can guarantee you, on behalf of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, it's probably not a fatal issue. What they faced was a fatal issue. So let's keep it in check. Let's keep it appropriate, and let's use the right kind of language. I think until we have the intellectual wherewithal, courage, and stamina to demonstrate that feedback must be constructive for it to be useful.
Right.
And so as an author, I wrote that back to the editor. While I appreciate this comment, I just want to put this in context. It's no matter what, it's not a fatal issue. Secondly, I ain't got to finish that. I'm just gonna let my friends finish. I'm like, the whites, like, are we serious right now? Like, what is going on in today's, like, what's going on? What's going on?
Okay, skip to the slide with the same reviewer I had that you had, Dr. Strayhorn. Let's see, where's the exact same reviewer? Where at? Let's see, right there, second image. To enhance the project, the team needs a comparison group. By only surveying HBCUs, the team lacks a counterfactual measure? Like, they didn't finish the thought. Right. So what are you saying? So you're saying that the thoughts, the experiences of people, and the study that we're proposing is looking at researchers at HBCUs. So the thoughts and experiences of researchers at HBCUs need some sort of comparative to validate the authenticity of those experiences? Explain that to me, reviewer number 1. Right? So why do I have to compare? And again, these other comments say the same thing. You should compare this to Black faculty at white schools. That's not who I'm interested in. Right? That is not who I'm interested in. You should have a comparison. What's it say? In addition to the faculty at HBCUs, the team might want to survey or interview Black faculty at traditional R1 institutions. That's not who I'm interested in. Right? They're at R1s. They're going to stay at R1. They're fine over there at the R1s. Right? The faculty I care about are the faculty who are at HBCUs, who are helping the students who are at HBCUs. I care about faculty and students at R1s, but I care most about the faculty and students at my HBCUs, right?
Right.
And as my colleague, Dr. Strayhorn said, no, we are not a monolith, right?
Right.
So the VUU story is not the WSSU story, is not the Hampton University story, is not the Howard University story, is not the Lemoyne-Owen University, the Lemoyne-Owen College story, right? It's not the Wiley College story. All of us have different stories. We have different values. We have different contributions that we make in the lives of our students through our research. So to put this whole white normative comparison as being the only way that we can validate or certify the credibility of our experiences and what we do at our institutions, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. And that's part of why we have to be the ones to tell this story.
Right.
Like, we have to be the ones to tell the story, because others, like these reviewers here, who, like in that last one, it's kind of blurry, but it says that I, as a researcher, didn't understand that most Black faculty do qualitative research. I'm sorry, but I run empirical analyses, I do regression analyses, I do mixed methods as well. But for them as a reviewer to say, this is what most Black faculty do, and you should understand that, and the fact that you don't is a weakness in methodology, I absolutely abhor this type of feedback. But this is part of the importance of what we have to do in this space, right? And that's our student affairs folks, our faculty, our administrators, we all have to fight this fight. Right? We all have to fight this fight.
And one of the things I always like to add is that, you know, we always talk about this concept of being at the table. And when you're given the opportunity to be at the table, what do you do? And so I always encourage Black scholars to get on the other side, you know, in terms of being a reviewer, so that we can begin to take up some of that space at the table. So me being an associate editor for ACPA About Campus journal, I am overseeing the HBCU edition. And I purposely accepted that invitation to be an associate editor because I wanted the voices of HBCU professionals. I wanted the voices and stories of what we're doing at HBCUs. And I know that if I'm not at the table, or someone who understands the advocacy of HBCUs at the table, we're going to continue to get these types of remarks for the work that we do. Fortunately, we have the Center for the Study of HBCUs now at Virginia Union, being led by none other than Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, and the work that he has done and will continue to do, and how he's creating this platform, assisting with the creation of this platform for our professionals is, for me, is mind-blowing, and it is timely. It is timely. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is understanding that we can't continue as Black scholars to say we want this change, but we're not willing to do the research that discusses the change and how we can move past for improvement. So I am commending, if you hear nothing else from me today, do the research, Black scholars. Do the research, not for you, but for the legacy that's coming. Do the research.
Yeah, it's so important to do the research, to support the research, to the faculty colleagues who are watching. It has been time for us to create space for the research. So even if it's not our area of expertise, when we have doctoral students and master students who want to study historically Black colleges, we should encourage it. We should cultivate it, nurture it. If there are ways in which any of us can be supportive to you in helping that student scan the literature and navigate the literature and understand how to frame the study the right way, you know, this is what the network really is about, both through NASPA Region 3, through the Center for the Study of HBCUs, and so much more, because I think that until we really start to tell our own story, create space for this story, not the story people want us to tell. Because that's the other thing I get from these reviewers. When I read what Dr. Lynch shared and what I shared, what I realize is that this is really a power move. You know, this idea that I'm going to change the fundamental question that you're trying to see, which, you know, if we could put it in that way, of course, no editor is going to agree to that. I don't even think reviewer number one would agree to that, but they're not thinking about it because, one, they're privileged not to think about it that way because they've always studied and been interested in topics that enjoyed widespread, familiarity, widespread adoption, widespread comfort. But when you start studying marginalized topics and marginalized communities, you don't move. I mean, we talk about it in graduate courses and in writing as if it's like, oh, let's just change the paradigm. Like it just happens like that, right? Or let's just move from the margin to the middle. It does not happen that way. Nothing comes from the margin to the middle without revolution, without an enormous amount of transformative, active energy. It's hard work. And so let me tell you, I spend more time writing back to editors and reviewers for grants and publications, and even for faculty members' promotion and tenure review, to create space for the kind of work that we're talking about. To me, that goes back to the very first question that Dr. K asked, and that is, what do Erin and I see as our role? And I know we got a really diverse group. That's another role that I see for myself. I'm not a brand new assistant professor. I've now been in the game for a little while. Although I'm a little dude, I've been around. And so now I have to use that space and that having moved through promotion and tenure to the senior ranks, to use it to create equity for others. And that does not mean that may mean I've got to write stronger letters and do more work than some folks. It may mean that I got to fight for my publication to get into this high journal, and other people's is, sort of review, resubmit, and you're accepted. But that's what I've decided to take on, because I believe that Black lives matter. I believe HBCUs matter. I believe our work matters. But it won't matter to other people unless we make it matter. The same way in which we've watched people have to stand up and protest in society in this, reckoning around race. I think we need to do it in the academy. Because listen, real talk, we got statues in the academy we need to tear down. I'm gonna stop. But there's some demigods in this academy that need to be pulled down, and we need to stop building monuments to them. And it shows up in who we cite and who we don't cite, and who we assign as reading and who we don't assign as reading, and whose theory gets used in practice, and what consultants get considered for the way in which we're going to connect with our students on our campus, and who gets promoted and don't get promoted. And we just got to stop it, because you see what happens. Look out in society. Society is, we're changing. And I think that I'm going to stop.
You hit it on the head though, Terrell. So we have to, right? We have to be the ones who are most fervently vocal, right, about those who are writing about us, right, who have never worked at, been educated by, right, HBCUs, but they are the end all be all when it comes to HBCUs. They're the ones the Chronicle is citing, right? Oh, HBCU, let me call so-and-so at such and such R1 who's never taught or been educated at an HBCU, right? So we have to start being those voices. And I'm so proud of the work that you are doing at the center that you've established at BU. And I am excited. I'm gonna call you out right now. I'm excited to be able to talk about what partnerships we at WSSU can have with the center at BU. I'm just put it out there now, because our social sciences are also very strong at Winston-Salem State University. Phenomenal researchers. But we have to do that. We have to absolutely, there we go. And there it is. And this is why. Next question. This is why.
The conversation is getting good, and I'm trying to look at time. So we're going to get through these questions and then open it up for questions to the audience, which, kind of taps into this next question is, how are we truly and actually benefited from receiving research dollars and grants at HBCUs?
I'm gonna jump right on in, because this is my favorite area, and my faculty who are on the call can testify to this in the chat as well. So we have to diversify our income at HBCUs, right? For the HBCUs, about 50% of the HBCUs are public, about 50% are private. And so public dollars are decreasing, okay, across the board nationally, okay? So we have to, as Dr. Strayhorn mentioned, we have to take our intellectual property and turn that into intellectual capital, right? I would push back on and say, we already had the intellectual capital. We have to find a mechanism to effectuate that capital in such a way that it has a return for the university. Because we're doing it, right, in public service, right? We're doing it in successful graduation rates and creating workforce, right, for our economy. But we also need to be doing it through R&D expenditures, okay? So WSSU for the first year, last year actually, was the first patent that we have submitted in the history of the university. It's one of our chemistry faculty, brilliant mind. I'm telling you, we have brilliant minds at my institution, brilliant mind. And so we submitted the first patent in the university's history, which once it comes to market, because I'm gonna speak that into existence, has the potential of bringing upwards of $100 million longitudinally to the university because of this process that he has created. Our research dollars bring back unrestricted funds that can be used for the university. We just published an article actually in your journal, Dr. Dixon. You just got that article published that looked at the correlation between R&D expenditures and student success at HBCUs. And I see one of my co-PIs, Dr. Louise Allen, is on as well, who helped to develop that article. So we found that there's a stronger correlation between what we're spending at HBCUs and R&D and student graduation, student retention rates, okay? So what does that mean? That means the R&D expenditures that are deeply connected to high impact practices, right? Student research are creating an environment in which our students are connected to people either through their faculty mentorships or their research mentorships, through cohort systems of research teams. They're creating environments in which students can have that, Terrell Strayhorn, 2006, sense of belonging. They have that environment through a research infrastructure, right? And so we have to be, I don't know how, but we have to go get this money. We have to go get this money.
Right.
WSSU has an over $51 million portfolio as a result of us going after this money and capitalizing on the brilliance that we have at the institution. And what that will do for us, it will return at 51 million approximately. It'll return to us about $1 million to $2 million in unrestricted funds, which we can then use on whatever needs we have as an institution. And then you look at institutions like Chapel Hill, 20 seconds, Chapel Hill, right? Multi-billion-dollar research infrastructure. Look at what they're returning in unrestricted funds off of a $2.2 billion research infrastructure, okay? That is the point that we need to understand, right? And it works the same way in student affairs. We just pulled in a $1.2 million grant on the student affairs side to be able to create a Job Corps Scholars Program through our career development, career services program. So this work, this funded work, right, crosses the boundaries of student affairs and academic affairs because all of it, right, benefits students. So that's the benefit. Sorry, I get excited about these things.
No, you're
The
fine.
only thing I will add here is, and I think Dr. Lynch talked about this earlier, again, we got to call this out because it's something that we should change. You know, I think we are benefiting from receiving research grant dollars because, you know, we have faculty who are world-class researchers. And we also, I think, benefit in ways that some of our predominantly white institutions don't often benefit in two ways. One is that not only do we have world-class researchers, but we have faculty who know how to, you know, teach well and to teach students who come to college sometimes with the least, right? So I would say that historically Black college faculty who are diverse, not exclusively Black, but are certainly employed at historically Black college, they were teaching using culturally relevant pedagogy before we even knew the term. You know, they were using it before we understood it and did it. And so what's happening is those instructors are learning to take their practice and answer important questions about learning and learning sciences. And so you see this integration of the hardcore disciplines. I don't mean to create you know, to bifurcate them that way or to set up this dichotomy between hard and soft sciences, but you see folks in disciplines like chemistry and biology and math thinking with social scientists about the study of use of scientific calculators in advanced calculus courses. And that's the kind of research that federal agencies like the NSF and others are funding. So we benefit because we have the right kind of expertise on both the science and the social science, the instruction or the education piece, and as well as the science piece coming together to form the kind of teams that work. And then the last is, we are historically Black colleges. So there are funds that are earmarked for us. Now, what I think has to stop happening is and I have seen this because I moved through predominantly white institutions and then took on leadership roles at historically Black colleges. And I can't tell you the number of times federal agencies would call me at a predominantly white institution and say, we want to get some money to a historically Black college by giving it to your institution, and then you subcontracting with the HBCU. And that will always marginalize and reduce the dollars and grants that Dr. K is on this slide that's received at a Black college. So what we've got to do is, as we're telling that story well, we should not only tell the story about the historic stories about HBCUs, that's undeniable. We should not just talk about the fact that they're homes away from home and the faculty go above and beyond the call of duty. That is important. But we should also tell the story about the science and the research and the expertise that our historically Black colleges possess.
Mm-hmm. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna run through, I think we have maybe 2 or 3 more questions. And so I'll give you all maybe a minute to respond, and then we'll open it up to the audience. And so
is that a Biden minute or a Trump minute?
I
just need to know real quick which.
We're gonna use your better judgment. And we talked about this a little bit, but what are some topics or areas of research that student affairs professionals can contribute to regarding HBCUs?
I'm going to yield to my esteemed colleague. This is him all day. I don't know how many times I've cited you, sir. Go ahead.
We are going to tag team on this one. So how about this? I say a few words, you say a few words. I mean, I think one is, if you think about it and do the research, we don't know a whole lot about student affairs practice at historically Black colleges. So I think there's a great starting point, including what are the functional areas at historically Black colleges, how are they organized, what are the professional development and staff development needs of professionals, what strategies work or don't work. I have a project that a collaboration with Royale Johnson, who's a professor at Penn State. He was my former graduate student. It's called Promising Places to Work in Student Affairs. There's a corollary project, Promising Places to Work in Community Colleges. In the Student Affairs projects, I can tell you that the number of HBCUs who have been featured or identified, well, first of all, who are able to participate, because the entry point into the project is you got to have institutional membership in ACPA. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there are similar efforts that Diverse Issues has. I'm not suggesting that that project is the only way to do it, but what I've learned is that we know very little about student affairs professionals, about student affairs work life, and about the promising practices that are employed in student affairs practice at HBCU. So if that appeals to anyone in master's or graduate programs or researchers, go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I would ditto all of that, and I would take it down even one step beneath that to undergraduates as well, right? So, and I'm sure you may not necessarily have NASPA undergraduate chapters, but engaging the student workers that we have in our spaces in student affairs in this type of work helps to cultivate the analytical mindedness that you need in the student affairs world, right? So you all are constantly, just like researchers, constantly asking questions, looking at the data, determining what the data say to develop the efficacy of that intervention or program that you implemented. That's research, right? That's research. So now just put it into a journal article, submit it somewhere, get the first rejection, submit it again, boom, right? So we have to understand that is part of the process and part of being part of the academy. That's just one of the things that we absolutely need to do. So I do everything Dr. Strayhorn said.
And then our last question, or the last question I want to pose to you all, is how do we apply research to practice at HBCUs?
I would say, just as I said right there, we have to write it up. We have to put it to paper. We have to put it to paper. If we're not disseminating or sharing our knowledge, then we're not able to apply, those lessons that we've learned, either through rigorous methodological, frameworks or not, right? So, we've got action research, right? You've got quantitative, qualitative research, right? There's all different types. Exactly. It is not research, Dr. Melton, until it is published. Absolutely, right? By definition of federal guidelines, it does not qualify as research until you try to generalize it to a greater body, right? Until you try to share or disseminate it. And so we absolutely have to do that, right? We have phenomenal people who are doing great things in great spaces. There's a researcher up at Tennessee State University, Dr. Melton, who is huge in IT, right? She is huge in technology as an instructional tool. And she literally goes around to companies and presents her findings to companies for them to be able to implement, right? So we have to get in that space, in that mindset in student affairs as well. So we have to think about all those things.
And yes, this is Dr. Melton. Hello all, and I want you to know on behalf of not just Tennessee State University, but all of the HBCUs, we really commend you for bringing this seminar together. And I've just been sitting in the back, just clapping, overjoyed, because you all are right on target. We have to publish as well as present. And being an old, and I'm going to say that in respect because I'm old, we have to start pulling each other up with this research. When I have research conferences, forum, seminars, I usually send out to people, hey, do you need a place to share your research? Or if I'm doing a journal, I call out to others to say, hey, I'm the editor, or we have a special section that you all can present. I'm here to share with you, with over 20, 30 years of experiences. That's how this works. It's relationships. So if you're doing something and you can add another HBCU colleague, to help co-author, to share, or even if it's an editorial, we have to start doing that. And again, life is good.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So now,
go ahead. I'm gonna let you know. No, let's take questions. I see so many questions in the chat.
all right, so let me funnel through. I know one question was, what are some of the, what is your focus in terms of research projects and topics at the center?
So yeah, so I put in the chat, like, I'd love to use this time, since it's shared between me, Dr. K, Dr. Erin, and I don't know, Dr. K's already done the inaugural blog. So Dr. Erin, you and I got to talk about what you'll do. And then I was just thinking and listening to Dr. Melton, and she's right, that we need to get books out. And so Dr. K, we need to be thinking about what your book in the book series, and Dr. Erin, what yours will be. I mean, really, seriously, I think that, this whole idea, we don't have a whole lot of books on student affairs, assessment, and evaluation in historically Black colleges. Maybe that's a great book for you to put together, Dr. K, and it could be an edited volume with folks who are in this meeting. I don't need to craft a book for you. I believe that both of you, I believe in your ideas enough to know that I can just say that. I don't have to worry about it. It'll be a good book. It'll be a book worth buying, and it'll be lovely. So let's just do it. We'll make it happen. So if you have other questions about the center, email us at centerforhbcus@vuu.edu, and I'll answer questions that both Dr. Erin and I and Dr. K can tag in. So the one I saw that I'd love to get us to think about is around infrastructure for research at HBCUs. I know this is a challenge. Let me say this, Dr. K said it earlier, HBCUs are not a monolith. I think Dr. Erin also echoed that. I'm echoing it again, just to remind us, although we refer to ourselves collectively as historically Black colleges, we are as diverse as the individuals who work and study there. And that's important to know because there are some historically Black colleges that have exceptionally strong infrastructure for research, where there's highly automated systems, and they can parallel what you would find even at our predominantly white counterparts, although that's not the norm that I want to keep reinforcing as what we're trying to be like. But that said, there are some HBCUs where there's room for improvement, process improvement, to make the research flow better and for it to be more stable. I think for those who are thinking about doing research at historically Black colleges that are like that, I tell people, come with a mind and here's what I know we can do. We can improve processes, we can strengthen infrastructure, we can tighten up procedures, we can improve purchasing. What we cannot do is we can't change people's hearts. We can't create commitment and passion and understanding toward HBCU. So I think you've got to have that to come to our institutions and want to work or study or lead. But then you come much like, so one of my relatives, won't name them because they're probably watching, was looking at buying a house, right? And so they went to this house and the house was really, I don't want a house that's perfectly beautiful. I want a house that's got some problems that I can, change the kitchen. I can turn the bathroom into something different. I want to do some work on the house to make it the house I want. I think that's the right perspective to have sometimes when you come into those institutions. It's not going to be perfect, but you got to come wanting to co-create and build and be part of something to help make us better. And I think if you come with that, the infrastructure can grow and change under the right leadership with the right amount of resources.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that real quick. We have to get out of our own way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's bottom line, right? My provost, I was one of 2 hires he made. He told me coming in, he was like, it's going to be a heavy lift. I don't mind the work, but we got to get out of our own way. We got to stop creating these policies that are so convoluted that it's impossible to read through. We have to stop creating procedures that absolutely solution-minded. We have to stop creating procedures that create more barriers to be able to get things done in an efficient manner, right? Like and that's not an HBCU problem. That's all institutions who are trying to right size in some sort of way, whether it's increasing student intervention success, whether it's increasing research infrastructures. But I have worked at 4 or 5 different universities at this point. It's all a blur. My last 2 have been HBCUs. I'm never going back, right? I am 125% pro HBCU. I will not teach at or work at another institution because I value what we do so much in this space. Right. And of the 2 institutions, one was an R2 at Tennessee State University, of which I'm a proud graduate, and now Winston Salem State University, which is an emerging R2 university. We're coming for you, A&T. So we have to get out of our own way to create the space that is both safe and efficient for our researchers on the faculty and staff side.
And as we close up, I want to ask this last question because I think it's important to the conversation. What are some resources and or support for aspiring researchers who serve on the administrative side without prior experience in the research space? You're
looking at one, and that's called this webinar.
A network, yeah.
I think this network, I think that NASPA provides a good deal of professional development and training. I mean, even while we are physically apart, we can stay socially connected through these virtual means. And so, I mean, it's really not just a plug for the work that the HBCU initiative in Region 3 is doing. But I mean, I think if you're on the administrative side, you haven't really thought much about research, but you want to get started, look for primers. And primers nowadays look like webinars and YouTube videos, and not just through Region 3, but through the larger NASPA network. I hope NASPA's okay. They should be, because I'm about to say it, that, there are other associations like NASAP, which has historically accommodated professionals who are at historically Black colleges. That's the National Association for Student Affairs Professionals. Quite honestly, it was born out of a time where folks like ourselves were not, could not be members of NASPA, right? We have to tell that story. Got to tell the story, be comfortable telling it, acknowledging the progress forward, but knowing that there are a lot of resources there. And then I'd close by saying that AERA the American Educational Research Association has another suite of resources that match with what NASPA offers. And a lot of that AERA provides is on the research front. It's how to start thinking about assessment, how to start thinking about evaluation, how to do program evaluation really, really well using low-cost methods.
And NALOA does that in the assessment area, and CEQA, which is specific to HBCUs and MSIs.
Yes. So I want to thank Dr. Strayhorn and Dr. Lynch for your time, your wisdom, for being here, and knowing that the conversation doesn't end today. And so this is an ongoing conversation. I want to thank all of you all who have participated in joining this webinar, those who are watching the recording. Thank you. We hope that you have taken something away from this webinar, and just want to throw in a plug that the next webinar will focus on the LGBT engagement at HBCUs, and have some phenomenal guest speakers for that. And that will be on October 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So if you have not registered for that, please register. And also want to say, if you're not a member of NASPA, please consider it to be a professional home for you, especially as Region 3 services majority of the HBCUs in this nation. So once again, thank you so much for being here.